Officially, the CIA was leaking secret data to Lavrov, while journalists leaked the secret negotiations between the Hungarian and Russian ministers online. The protests in Russia are just the beginning. There are plans to assassinate Putin. The occupiers are suffering huge losses at the front, and this is not only thanks to the Ukrainian military. Ust-Luga has been burning for over a week now. Ukrainian drones are giving the oil port no respite. No chances at all. An urgent ban on gasoline exports has been imposed. There is a severe shortage of fuel. These are today's news. My name is Eva Nikolashvili. Like and subscribe, because we're starting now. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó leaked information from closed EU discussions to Lavrov, and this is no longer just a rumor, but a fact. The media have published secret negotiations between Lavrov and Szijjártó, which took place on August 30th, 2024. The head of the Russian Foreign Ministry called his Hungarian counterpart and asked for help in lifting sanctions from the sister of Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov, Gulbakor Ismailova. The Hungarian minister was more than happy to agree to help us. Now listen to me for a moment. I called specifically at Alisa's personal request, and he just asked me to remind you that you were supposed to be taking care of that important matter regarding his sister. Mrs. Ismailova? Yes, absolutely. The crucial point to understand is that, in close coordination and partnership with Slovakia, we are planning to formally raise the comprehensive proposal of the European administration to ensure its inclusion. We intend to officially present this matter during the upcoming sessions scheduled for next week. Furthermore, as the new cycle of regular periodical reviews begins to take place, this specific subject will be carefully and systematically inserted into the broader topic of discussion for further consideration, and we will do everything to carry it. After this, Lavrov thanked Szijjártó. Before hanging up, the latter added, "I am always at your service." But we never really doubted that. The protests in Russia are being orchestrated by Putin's internal enemies from the political elite. And it could even come to an attempt on the life of the Russian dictator himself. Kremlin representatives say this anonymously. So what and who is actually threatening the regime and the Russian dictator? Let's watch.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Protests took place in Russia against internet blockades, which Putin's henchmen tried to suppress even before they began.
We came out for a walk. What can I say? The entire Baladnaya Square is cordoned off. Everything is cemented. In Moscow, there are National Guard officers everywhere, and they're checking people with large bags here.
The largest cities in Arefia were effectively placed under heightened control. Any gathering of people was perceived as complicity, and simply having the opportunity to go out onto the square was already grounds for detention.
Even here, the St. Petersburg administration freaked out and put up barricades. And over there are more people in uniform standing.
But even preventive detentions, cordoned off squares, and pressure from law enforcement didn't stop them, those who still dared to go out.
Hello, friends. We've been detained. I'm currently at the police station. So far, they haven't explained why. We left the Ministry of Internal Affairs building with a volunteer, with Katya. So, right in the middle of the street, they just came up and said, "Okay, come with us." Well, we went with them, they said, and took an explanation from us about putting up these flyers.
At least 18 people were detained in Russia at unsanctioned protests against internet blockades. In Moscow, the rally was not authorized by the authorities. Allegedly due to COVID restrictions, it was supposed to take place on Bolotnaya Square. However, on the day of the protest, the area around it was effectively turned into a controlled zone. Security forces cordoned off the territory selectively, checked the documents of passers-by, searched personal belongings, and recorded people's faces on camera. Moreover, even the urban environment was prepared in advance. Municipal services painted the benches in the nearest park, making it impossible for people to stay there for long. And any attempt to stop or gather immediately attracted the attention of the police.
The authorities did not allow protest actions to take root.
Putin's lackeys not only refused to allow rallies, but did so in the most demonstrative way possible. Even in places where permission was initially granted, the events were cancelled at the last moment, citing formal reasons, from the threat of drones to suddenly scheduled events, such as roller skating masterclasses. At the same time, the Ministry of Internal Affairs publicly warned about possible administrative and criminal liability.
Not a single application for a rally was approved, and accordingly, so many security forces were deployed that they detained virtually anyone who showed up. For the demonstration to take place, people at least need to somehow gather together. The police did not even allow them to come out in any region or to somehow see each other.
Detentions also took place in other cities, in St. Petersburg, Voronezh, Kaluga, Novosibirsk, where the squares and parks where the rallies were planned were also cordoned off in advance. And at the sites, there were reinforced police and OMON units on duty.
There was an attempt to organize mass rallies across all of Russia. There was an attempt. And the discontent is such that despite all the restrictions, despite all the bans, people are trying to protest against what they don't like. It's not even just what they don't like. It seems that now it's against internet blockages. Well, going out is more or less, it's not exactly that it's safe, but at least you can try to make it work. For the better part of the last 2 years, we have not witnessed even the slightest attempts to coordinate or organize any more or less large-scale public protest demonstrations.
But apparently depriving Russians of their usual and favorite services was not enough for the Kremlin. And now it's not just about blockages, but about a full-fledged system of punishments. In Russia, there is discussion about introducing fines for refusing to use the national messenger MAX. The proposed range of fines is extremely harsh, from 50,000 to 3 million rubles, depending on the circumstances and the nature of the refusal to use the service.
There is hope that we will introduce fines for everyone starting from September 7th of this year. We are aiming for a date from which all Russians will be held accountable for actions directed against Max, said a source to the channel, according to Kremlin Tabakurka.
But it seems that what at first glance appeared to be harmless rallies could become the end of Putin's empire. Kremlin Tabakurka. According to a high-ranking source in the presidential administration, it is allegedly not only activists and dissatisfied citizens who are behind attempts to organize protests, but also representatives of the Russian elites themselves, whom the Kremlin increasingly refers to as internal enemies of the system.
We are aware of plans for serious protests that could become a problem for our security forces. That is why we nip everything in the bud. Right now, this is working. And the organizers of these vile demonstrations will now defend the internet, then demand a quick end to the special military operation. And after that, I wouldn't rule out that they will organize an assassination attempt on Vladimir Vladimirovich. I'm sure it's already being prepared. Ahead lie several dangerous and decisive months for the fate of Russia. We understand all the challenges and are preparing to respond in order to prevent the worst, said the channel's interlocutor, according to Kremlin Tabakurka.
Tension in Russia is only gaining momentum, and with each new turn it becomes increasingly clear that this is no longer just about protests against internet restrictions, but about a much deeper process. And the way it has been responding for years, the well-drilled system only makes it clearer that behind the tough rhetoric lies fear and a determination to hold on to power at any cost. The Russians are trying to use the fog and drizzle to advance covertly in Grishino, which is northwest of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, but without success. The enemy is being targeted even as they approach the settlement. This was reported by the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces. According to Ukrainian military data, the occupiers are complaining about being unable to enter the settlement freely or advance within its boundaries. They are also experiencing shortages of water and food. The defense forces have recorded instances of the enemy attempting to move through Hryshyn in search of food supplies. The Russian army is suffering record losses in March, but it is not only Ukraine's defense forces eliminating the occupiers. Russian infantry are increasingly engaging in self-elimination. Ukrainian soldiers are also eliminating Russians thanks to insoles. All the interesting details are coming up in the report.
The first month of spring has brought a new anti-record for the Russian army. March has seen a high number of losses for the Russian army. In addition to eliminations by Ukrainian soldiers at the front, there is daily video evidence showing Russian infantry resorting to self-destruction.
For 2026, this is quite a high figure. It is not high for 25. Since in 25, we saw figures for eliminated Russian occupiers reaching 40 to 41,000. For example, in March of 2025, it was 41,160 personnel, and in December, 35,000. Nevertheless, as a starting position for the beginning of 2026, more than 30,000 losses of Russian occupier personnel by the third month is quite high.
Most often this happens after injuries sustained as a result of drone attacks or in situations of complete encirclement by Ukrainian drones. This was reported by the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Mikhailo Fedorov. According to him, such behavior is a consequence of decisions made by the military political leadership of the Kremlin. In particular, Russian propaganda convinces people that they have control and superiority over the situation, but the real picture on the battlefield is significantly different.
The number of suicides. In Russian units, it is only increasing. And this concerns not just suicides. In the rear zone, under rear conditions, there is a large number of verified suicides, which already exceed 450. These are only the verified cases, those that have been captured in photos or videos. If we talk about unverified cases, even monitoring groups and analysts admit that the actual number could be 5 times higher. When compared directly to the officially verified number of incidents, this is actually a very high figure. Roughly once every single day, or perhaps once every 2 days, some type of drone or another constantly detects a potential suicide.
In addition, according to the minister, the Russian command effectively forbids soldiers from surrendering, promoting the narrative that it is better to die immediately. At the same time, the losses of the Russian army continue to grow rapidly.
March could set a record for the number of Russians killed. The dynamics of the losses indicate that, thanks to the Ukrainian defense forces, enemy casualties will exceed 30,000 severely wounded and killed.
The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is also making an interesting announcement. They say that reaching the mark of 50,000 losses in a month could have catastrophic consequences for the Russian army. The agency hinted at possible additional measures to intensify this trend.
The Ukrainian army is also resorting to more creative methods of eliminating the enemy. Ukraine is sending insoles with explosives to the occupiers at the front, disguised as humanitarian aid. Forbes writes about this. Ukrainian intelligence officers allegedly planted explosive insoles in shipments for Russian military funds, using Russian volunteers and charitable foundations to transport them, allowing them to be passed off as ordinary humanitarian aid. Each one...
The insole contains 1.5 grams of TNT. Such a tiny charge won't destroy a vehicle or a bunker. However, if it hits a foot at close range, it can cause serious injury.
The first shipments took place in early March and could have amounted to tens of thousands of units. At the same time, it is reported that the scheme was only partially uncovered after a mistake by one of the participants. Ukrainian agents used at least one intermediary blindly. That is, this person may not have known the true nature of the cargo. This mistake, according to the military source, helped the FSB identify one of the shipments.
Recently, the number of 200s among Russian troops has been steadily and systematically increasing. By the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026, this figure was about 60 to 65% of the total monthly losses. Let's take a closer look at the nature of these significant losses. In other words, the Russian military is currently losing more personnel killed in action than those who are simply wounded. This is a very striking statistic, especially when you consider that, in general, the average historical ratio of killed to wounded is typically around 1 to 3. 1 killed on average to 3 wounded.
The Ukrainian president also made an interesting statement about Russian losses. According to the head of state, the current ratio of Ukrainian to Russian military losses is about 1 to 8, in Ukraine's favor. Zelensky noted that at the beginning of the full-scale war, this ratio was much lower, about 1 to 3. And once again, the port of Ust-Luga. Ukrainian drones have once again attacked the Leningrad region and inflicted further damage on the port infrastructure. Such strikes have been ongoing for almost a week now. According to the head of the region, Alexander Drozdenko, Russian air defense shot down nearly 40 UAVs. The governor also confirmed that there is additional damage at the port of Ust-Luga, and locals are recording numerous fires on the territory of the port. Ukraine does not leave the barbaric air attacks by the Russian army on Ukrainian cities unanswered. A strike on Krasnodar. This confirms it. With his invasion of Ukraine, Putin has personally brought the war into the homes of his own Russians. Russian territory is once again in turmoil.
Some kind of sound, something flying. Well, where is something flying? Oh. Damn, I set up the camera just in time. What was that explosion even for? It's like, it'll be a nuclear one or something.
The Russian Ministry of Aggression, as usual, reported bravely. Overnight, more than 100 Ukrainian drones were shot down in 9 Russian regions, as well as over the waters of the Sea of Azov and over temporarily occupied Crimea. How many were actually shot down is unknown, but the fact is some got through. That's a fact. Krasnodar in particular was hit. There, one of the drones crashed into a multi-story residential building. Local authorities reported 3 people injured. The Rostov region was also awake all night. The head of the region stated that they were attacked by more than 60 drones. Taganrog was hit as well. There, as a result of falling debris, residential buildings caught fire. And once again, Russian air defense is to blame for everything. Russian air defense was operating directly over residential buildings. Local residents filmed their supposed repelling of the attack. But in the Samara region, either the air defense did not work, or as always, it turned out to be useless. Residential buildings in Tolyari were not damaged. The same cannot be said for the Kuibyshev Azot chemical plant, which had already been attacked on March 11th. The enterprise is among the 10 largest in Russia's nitrogen industry. And there, once again, one got through.
There is actually even more. Behind the house.
Smoke. The daily strikes on Russian cities are forcing officials to make excuses to the Russian people. On federal channels, Kremlin loyalists keep insisting that Russian air defense is the best in the world. But now a new talking point has been added. It turns out that these strikes are not scary at all and are even good for Russians.
I state with full responsibility, we have the best air defense in the world, and our air defense is the best. No one else has anything like it. No one has it today. And the fact that sometimes a drone manages to reach quite deep inside the country is, in a way, even a good thing, because we gain experience in repelling massive raids.
But even so-called military bloggers have stopped believing Russian officials. And after watching drones set fire to the Ust-Luga port for several days in a row, they shared a terrifying suspicion.
In light of all these events, there are only 2 possible explanations. If suddenly, when enemy nuclear missiles are launched at us, our air defense leaves the chat in exactly the same way, a proper retaliatory strike might not even happen, because it could very well turn out that the real situation is the state of the strategic missile forces is consistent with all the other structures of the Russian Ministry of Defense. In other words, they limit themselves exclusively to impressive reports. But we won't have time to find out about it.
By the way, about Ust-Luga. This oil terminal port continues to be hit by Ukrainian drones. For almost a week now, things have been consistently heated there. And the president of Ukraine does not hide the fact that the attacks on Ust-Luga are a response to strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And official Kyiv is even ready to stop these responses. For this, it is enough for Moscow to stop its attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
We are not just striking, we are responding. Why am I reminding you of this? In recent times, following the onset of the widespread global energy crisis, we have been receiving various signals and inquiries from a number of our international strategic partners who are asking about the specific ways we might reduce our current responses, directed against the Russian Federation's vast oil and broader energy sectors. If Russia is ready to stop striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure, we will not retaliate against theirs.
But as long as the Kremlin hesitates, Russian territory will continue to see action and lose money. However, Ukrainian drones and missiles are unlikely to be upset if they need to keep working. The Kremlin has urgently banned gasoline exports due to logistics problems, infrastructure damage, and the risk of fuel shortages on the domestic market. Exclusive details coming up next. On the brink of collapse, Putin's Russia is getting closer to a crisis. The Kremlin is officially imposing a complete ban on the export of automobile gasoline for all market participants.
These are all the results of their work.
The restrictions will take effect from April 1st and will remain in place for at least 4 months.
By taking this specific approach, things will become significantly more peaceful and stable. Life will be far more affordable for everyone, and it will be entirely feasible and realistic to create much better conditions for long-term economic development.
This decision was made after an emergency meeting of representatives of the oil industry, where they officially confirmed a critical shortage of fuel within the country. The main goal of the restrictions was to protect domestic consumers and attempt to stop the rapid rise in prices at gas stations. In fact, the industry has admitted that it is unable to simultaneously fulfill export contracts and meet the needs of its own market under conditions of production shortages.
Before Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, the export of petroleum products, primarily gasoline, brought Russia $75 billion a year. Well, as we can clearly observe from recent developments, the Russian Federation has repeatedly made the decision to refuse the exportation of various types of gasoline and other essential petroleum products lately. This is primarily because there is a very real and significant physical shortage of these resources, and it is currently impossible to fully export them due to the extensive damage sustained by Russia's very own logistical port facilities, which are used for the specialized task of shipping this vital fuel to international markets abroad.
The ban on gasoline exports followed a series of drone attacks on oil refineries, as a result of which at least 3 of them stopped producing fuel, including 2 just in the past week. And many plants are also unable to resume operations due to sanctions on Western equipment.
The amount of gasoline in Russia, let's say, has decreased and export opportunities have diminished. But Russia is not going to say that it can't export as much gasoline as before because Ukraine is carrying out strikes. Russia tries not to admit such things. That's why, officially, they say that a ban on gasoline exports is being introduced because it is justified. There really is a gasoline shortage, so there you have it. We are exporting less because we have banned exports.
During 2025, the Ukrainian Defense Forces carried out more than 140 attacks on oil refineries and oil depots in Russia. According to Reuters calculations last week, this amounted to about 5% of Russia's oil export capacity, which became the most serious disruption in the supply of black gold in the modern history of Putin's country.
This is indirect confirmation that the strikes being carried out by Ukraine's special services, let's call those who are doing this, they are having an effect. The Russian authorities do not admit this in words, but in practice they are banning gasoline exports, which precisely indicates that there is damage, and it is significant.
In other words, foreign currency revenues amounting to billions of dollars have come under threat, since gasoline exports are one of the key sources of budget income. Now, these strategic cash flows are effectively blocked due to the imposed embargo.
Russia is under-earning from the export of petroleum products, which, although not as profitable as raw resources, still used to bring in money. By resources, I mean oil and gas, but petroleum products also brought in revenue. So here too, there will obviously be losses. $75 billion was the figure before the full-scale war. But during the war, Russia was selling about 47 to 49, up to $50 billion a year in petroleum products. So there you have it, an approximate amount of lost revenue if such a ban continues until the end of the year.
The Kremlin is sacrificing the profits of oil giants to appease small businesses and the population, preventing a fuel crisis under martial law and amid attacks on infrastructure.
The pressure that the Russian authorities are putting on businesses could have a very negative effect when businesses simply start saying that they are shutting down. And this trend is also present in the Russian economy. And if businesses close, if there are fewer and fewer enterprises, the tax base shrinks. And that could be even worse for the budget. So here, this is called multiplying unfavorable scenarios, multiplying situations where you can't find a good solution. And you are constantly forced to choose between bad options.
A ban on gasoline exports was already introduced in Russia in August of last year, when Ukrainian drone attacks knocked out about 15% of refinery capacity, and it was lifted on January 31st. It is expected that if the situation with the restoration of oil refineries does not improve in the near future, the export ban may be extended beyond July 2026.
The economy cannot withstand this war, and Russia may increasingly lean towards the scenario of Germany during the First World War, when no one captured Berlin, there were no military actions on German territory, and Germany was the capitalist. Because there was no possibility to ensure normal economic life in the country. Russia is very close to this stage. The second question is when exactly it will reach this crisis state. Some are already saying it will happen this year, but closer to its end or even in the middle.
That's all I have time to share for now, but we're not saying goodbye. We'll see you again in just a few hours on the project In Trend. There I will talk about the fatal traffic accident in Donetsk for which Russian soldiers were responsible, but they are trying to cover it up. About new problems with the Max messenger, about Putin thanking Kadyrov's son, as well as the 6-day work week in Russia and other interesting news. See you soon.